It was New Year's Eve 2011 when my phone rang. Assuming the worst, I took the call. "David," whispered my then 85-year-old grandmother, "there is a burglar in my house. Can you come over?" Grabbing my coat, I said, "Don't worry, I'm on my way. Wait, just one more thing. Have you called the police yet?" My grandmother replied, without missing a beat, "No, I thought I'd call you first." I don't know how rabbis are meant to be more capable than policemen, but jumping into the car, I speed dialed the police. A few minutes later, I arrived at my grandmother's house. There were muddy footprints everywhere, including going up the stairs into her bedroom. She was sitting downstairs looking quite shaken, and giving her a hug, I asked her what had happened, and she replied, "They came into my bedroom." "They?" I asked. "Yes, there were 3 of them," she replied. By then the police had arrived. They interviewed her and she explained that as she heard the burglars coming up the stairs, she felt scared. This was, after all, a woman who had experienced childhood traumas under the Nazis in Germany. And she went on to say, but as they entered her bedroom, rather than fear, fury overcame her. She sat bolt upright in bed and, using her long retired head teacher's voice, said, "How dare you break into my house? I've pushed this button around my neck," her panic button, by the way, which went to social services, not to the police. And she informed them that the police were on their way, and then she said, "Now get out of my house." Apparently they ran, and not content, Grandma got into her stair lift and rode down the stairs to see them off. As she said to us, with her gently accented English, "Coming down the stairs in my nightclothes, I must have seemed like an old vitch to those wicked boys." The police, shaking their heads with admiration, asked my grandmother, "What's your secret?" I already knew the answer. For nearly 30 years, Mark Twain, one of the great American authors, penned essays with rather too many anti-Semitic tropes. In 1899, trying to set the record straight, Mark Twain wrote a new paper entitled Concerning the Jews. And whilst it still perpetuated some prejudiced tropes, it was on the whole pretty sympathetic. This is how Twain ends his paper. "If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1/4 of 1% of the human race. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to be heard of, but he has always been heard of. He has made a marvelous fight in all ages, and he has done it with his hands tied behind him." And Twain goes on to write, "The Egyptians and the Persians rose, filled the planet, then faded away. The Greeks and the Romans followed, and then they were gone. The Jew saw them all, survived them all, and is now what he always was. All things are mortal but the Jew. What is the secret of his immortality?" Since that night at my grandmother's house, I have known the answer to Twain's question. That answer, our secret, is something I believe we're all badly in need of right now. I think we can all agree that it's been a difficult year. We've transitioned from a pandemic into an energy crisis. It's been a difficult year because of the ongoing war in Ukraine, a change in prime ministers, and the loss of our beloved Queen. After such a difficult year, and with so many imminent challenges on the horizon, today on Rosh Hashanah, I want to let you in to our secret. And what is that secret? In one word, resilience. As historian Deborah Lipstadt puts it, we Jews are resilient because we cannot afford not to be. Without it, we would have disappeared centuries ago. Yes, resilience is our secret. But what exactly is resilience? We hear it bandied about all the time. He needs to be more resilient, or we're working on our corporate resilience. But when I've asked people to define what they mean by resilience, they struggle to pin it down. The word resilience derives from a Latin verb which means to rebound or recoil. By the early 19th century, in the discipline of engineering, resilience meant returning to the original shape after being compressed. I love this idea that no matter how much we Jews have endured, we've always sprung back. The rabbis of the Talmud understood this, and they asked, how can the Jewish people be likened to olives? And they answer that when olives are pressurized and beaten, they produce their finest oil. And now, whilst that process may produce a positive output, it does not provide for me a metaphor for resilience, because crushed olives will never bounce back to their original shape. Perhaps a better Jewish image of resilience comes from the Exodus story, when the ancient Egyptians enslaved the children of Israel. Responding to that trauma, the Torah says, "V'cha'asher ya'anu oto, kein yirber, v'chein yifrotz." But the more they oppressed them, the more they endured and bounced back. Now that sounds like a Jewish response, more like our secret superpower. In 1939, the global Jewish population was 16.6 million. Today, we are only 14.8 million. But despite the Shoah, we're growing and slowly bouncing back. And that is because we are resilient. And we're resilient in the following ways. Firstly, we stick together. The Hebrew word for community, kehilah, that Rabbi Helen spoke about last night, literally means gathering together. In engineering, a material can become more resilient when connected with others just like it. Take a solitary stick of dried spaghetti. All too easy to snap, but join that stick to a bundle of spaghetti, and the strength and elasticity of the collective demonstrates its resilience. The sage Rabbi Hillel understood this, and he advised us not to separate ourselves from the community, because our resilience is magnified when we share the strain. Just look at how this country came together over the last few weeks to mourn the loss of our remarkably resilient Queen. That shared grief has fostered national resilience in a moment of great change, and that collective grief has strengthened and bolstered the resilience of our new King. But simply sharing our troubles does not make us resilient. We Jews have developed other techniques. We adapt, we contribute to society, we invest in our futures, and we do this first and foremost through education. The adage is true, knowledge is power. And through education, we boost our resilience. Time and again, I'm asked how best to ensure Jewish resilience in a family so that a person's grandchildren are likely to be Jewish. The answer is simple. If you want a strong future Jewish family, gather them around your table and educate them about the rituals of Judaism that you love, especially the fun ones, because we remember best when we laugh. Which brings me to my next component of Jewish resilience, our humor. We Jews have developed an ability to laugh through the tears. It's a dark humor and a wonderful coping mechanism. Here's an example. Rabbi Altman and his secretary were sitting in a Berlin coffee house in 1935. Rabbi Altman said to his secretary, "I noticed you're reading Der Stürmer. I can't understand why. Are you some kind of self-hating Jew?" "On the contrary, Frau Epstein," replied the rabbi, When I used to read the Jewish papers, all I discovered were Jewish woes. But now that I read Der Stürmer, I see so much more. We Jews control all the banks. We dominate in the arts. And we're on the verge of taking over the entire world. You know, it really cheers me up. As you see, humor can be deeply subversive, and how befitting that the greatest exemplar of resilience in the world right now is a Jewish comedian. Who would have thought that the Ukrainian voiceover for Paddington Bear would be leading his nation's incredible efforts in a David versus Goliath war of defense? President Zelensky has shown the world that a determined smile can help stand up even to the mightiest foe. But what about those amongst us who, like the olives, feel beaten and crushed and cannot quite bounce back? Well, alongside the strength of community, the loving support of our friends and family, and the wisdom of our painful history, there's one other secret ingredient: hope. And that is the pure olive oil which soothes. Viktor Frankl, the famous psychologist, lost his father in Theresienstadt, his brother and mother in Auschwitz, and then his wife in Bergen-Belsen. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl recalls a hopeless moment on a freezing labor march when blistered feet and incessant hunger almost crushed his spirit. Just as he was sinking into a fatal despair, Frankl clung on to something: the need for meaning in his life. He visualized himself in the not-too-distant future giving a well-attended psychology lecture on the traumas of the camps. That hopeful future image of returning to his old life became Frankl's anchor, galvanizing his mental resilience. And as he wrote, we must never forget that we can find meaning in life, even when confronted with a hopeless situation. This determination to hold on to hope and to never give up spans throughout Jewish history, from the modern state of Israel all the way back to the very first Israelite. In Genesis, Jacob is attacked at night by a mystery assailant. Despite discovering that his aggressor is an angel, Jacob never gives up. He resists and wrestles until the sun is about to rise, at which point the angel panics. Still, Jacob holds on. I will not let you go until you bless me. The angel acquiesces and blesses Jacob with a new name, Israel, the one who wrestles with God and people, yet prevails. Surely our Jewish resilience is in the very name Israel, because we, the children of Israel, never give up. I'm sure many of us can remember back in January when a British terrorist held several congregants and their rabbi hostage at a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. Throughout the 10-hour ordeal, as we all held our breath, Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker never gave up. He kept calm, and at the right moment, he threw a chair at the terrorist so that, like Moses, he could lead his flock to safety. In response to Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker's heroism, a new book has just been published. Can you guess its not-so-secret name? Jewish Resilience. No student of history can dispute it. We Jews are resilient. Our cohesive families and communities are like giant, slightly unwieldy bundles of spaghetti. Across the millennia, through sticking together, through championing education, through laughing despite the difficulties, through holding on to hope, and through never, never giving up, we Jews have learnt to become resilient because we've had no other choice. But I don't believe that our resilience is a secret. Certainly my grandmother had it in spades, but so do we, which is why on this Rosh Hashanah, let us undertake that whatever this year may bring, joy or sorrow, love or loss, profit or hardship, warmth or cold, that we will come together as a community in order to find the resilience to not just endure, not just survive, but to thrive. There is an ancient Jewish proverb, ask God not for a lighter burden, but for broader shoulders. May we be each other's broader shoulders. And so as we transition from the old year to the new, let us recommit ourselves to the words said each and every time that we finish a book of Torah and begin the next. Chazak, chazak, v'nitchazek. Be strong, be resilient, and let us strengthen one another. Shana Tova.